Well, it was a bit nervy at the end of that game, but yet again, Manchester City get the win. Will anyone catch them?
No, I don't think anybody can catch them. I think Liverpool, they're having a good go, but I just think Manchester City have got more than enough. I don't think they've hit top gear yet. And what I love about Manchester City when you watch them, every game they play, teams come up with a conundrum for them to solve, and they solve it within the first 10-15 minutes. And the one thing you'd say, any team that plays against Manchester City, they can't have a rigid system. They have to change continuously, because Manchester City are full of players that are bright, very clever. Guardiola loves his intelligent players and the problem solvers.
But what is the best way then to approach a game against Manchester City?
Well, Liverpool showed it last season. You know, to actually be aggressive, be in their face, but play really good football. So they closed them down right from the front, right from in their own half. They made them make mistakes. They won possession, and they actually, it was almost like they shocked them at times. I didn't think they were used to anyone really going at them as much as Liverpool did last season. So I think if you've got the right squad of players, the right type of football that you play, you can hurt them in that way. But we're talking about, you know, upper echelons. So the rest of the teams, the lesser teams, I think it's more about being compact, being a bit more physical. I mean, the first thing when you were talking there, I'm thinking about Stoke days. There's not a team out there anymore like a Stoke that would get in your face, particularly at home, and it didn't matter how well they played football, you know, whether it was Arsenal, whether it was, you know, Man United going there, Liverpool going there, it was always a battle, an unbelievable battle, and they came off that pitch knowing they played a one hell of a football game.
I think as well, it's playing against Manchester City, it's having a quality and being brave as well. And we talk about teams that have the central midfielder that's very gifted on the ball. In an ideal world, you play through Manchester City's press and you can get at them, but there's only Manchester City. They've got a David Silva, a De Bruyne, Bernardo Silva on the pitch at the same time. There are other teams that maybe have one of them type of play, but he can't do it on his own. And the best way is, like I say, to try and play through the press, because if you try and play over it, your centre forward is just going to keep getting isolated time after time after time. And that's the thing with Manchester City. It's very difficult to get out.
You have to get the press absolutely spot on every time, because they've got so many options when they have the ball. So players are always making runs. They're so well drilled. They're such good players. Every single player wants the ball. So if the opposition doesn't have their press spot on every time, they'll play through you. They'll play around you. And that's the biggest challenge for most teams. I think, like I said before, Liverpool last season got it spot on a couple of occasions there, and they hurt them. They beat them. But
then this season, Manchester City played slightly differently against Liverpool, and it was a stalemate.
And they probably should have won the game, Man City. I mean, they missed the penalty, and it was an unusual approach, really. We all thought, you know, it'd be like, you know, head-to-head, end-to-end football, but it wasn't. Manchester City took on a slightly more defensive kind of attitude, and it did catch Liverpool by surprise.
And it's not something that we've seen Manchester City do, because typically teams are giving a lot of the ball to Manchester City, taking a lot of the ball. Maybe it's that way around.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the teams that are wanting to challenge Manchester City, the top end, to try and earn the Premier League title and win it back off them, is that they have to change the way that they play twice a season. That's a big problem, because what you have to do, you're talking about top teams, and when you look at the top teams, they dominate possession. And it's something that, you know, obviously this was last season. They dominate possession. The minute they go on the pitch and they're playing against Manchester City, before the game's even begun, they have to change the way that they play. And to do that for 2 games in a season is near enough impossible. So straight away, you're on the back foot and on the defensive. So straight away, like I say, Manchester City, they're up on you before the game's even begun.
And that wouldn't necessarily be a problem, would it? Consider it's the change in how they play, rather than the fact that they don't have a lot of possession against City.
It's not a problem for a team like Liverpool, because I think Liverpool are probably one of, if not the best counter-attacking teams in Europe. But when you're a team like Tottenham at times that can look to dominate possession, all of a sudden you're saying, right, well, we're just going to give you the ball, we're going to allow you to have the ball, so we'll sit back. Well, then all of a sudden, Harry Kane can get isolated. The front men can get isolated, Giroud or Morata can get isolated. And that's not what they're used to week in, week out. And what that does, I think, as well, like obviously you've been at Chelsea, you've seen what it's like at the top teams in the Premier League. That sends a negative message out to the players. It's basically saying, well, we're going to change our style for 2 games a season because we're not good enough. So straight away you're going in with a sort of a negative for the team, instead of saying, no, we will go and show what we're capable of and what we're capable of doing in the game. You're actually changing the way that you play to make sure that you're not too open against a team like Manchester City.
But the thing is, by any measure, the rest of the teams in the Premier League aren't as good as Manchester City. You don't, not just looking at the league table, but looking at any kind of analysis of the way that they play.
No, that's right. I mean, Manchester City are by far and above better than every other team in the league at the moment. And it's unlikely that that's going to change unless it's a catastrophe. I think, you know, you look at Manchester City, you look at every single one of those players, and I think for me, one of the best examples is someone like Sergio Aguero. When Pep Guardiola first came into the club, he was one of the first players that people talked about him potentially leaving the club, not really fitting into the system, not putting in the work ethic, the workload that Pep Guardiola wanted from his striker. And it took a little bit of time from adjustment, but he is lifted to another level. And it's every single player on that pitch puts a shift in. It doesn't matter who they are, how big a name they are, they're all working incredibly hard every time, and it makes it so difficult for everyone else.
So you have talented players, incredibly talented players, who are working exceptionally hard. You have a manager who's got them thinking not just in his way, but being able to think on the pitch and to change things around and adapt. And yet you say they're not quite in top gear yet. How and where do they improve from where they are now?
I think it's the fluidity in the team, which will continuously get better. One of the things I would say is that when you look at Manchester City, so come the weekend, Manchester City's game, when we get the starting 11, we don't know what system they're going to play. So straight away, the opposition are looking at it, because I've done commentary on their games before, and I'm like, right, OK, they're setting up as a back three. They start the game and they're setting up as a back four. Now, the opposition may well be thinking of setting up as a three, but it's a four as well. And within that starting 11, you know, if Aguero's playing up front, what you've got players with ability in that team, and we've seen it before. Sterling playing week in, week out. We've seen him play as a false nine. We've seen Jesus come and play as a centre forward. We've seen Aguero dropping deep. We've seen David Silva taking a deeper role. So before the game's even begun, you do not know how they're going to set up. We've seen teams say, right, OK, what we're going to do, we're going to play narrow against you. We're going to play narrow against you, allow you to put cross into the box. Well, OK, well then the likes of Sterling and Sané will get the ball and do whatever they want to do. The fullbacks don't want that, so the fullbacks go out. All of a sudden the gaps are there then for Bernardo Silva and David Silva to go through. They've got a plan A, B, C and D. That's the thing, and whoever they're playing against, you know, Guardiola talks about it. He spoke about Philipp Lahm so many times as well. He loves intelligent players, and he's not only got exceptional world-class players, he's got intelligent players as well that can just flick things when they need to, change the system, change the way that they're playing, change the position, and to be able to do that mid-game, that must be a dream for a manager. Yeah,
there's a couple of things that you know, for when you look at Manchester City and where they're going, where they are at, and how much further can they go. You know, how can Pep Guardiola continually improve them? That's his biggest challenge, you know, in that he's got to continue to evolve them, you know, demand more. And then it's that balancing of the players' hunger and desire. You know, they've won the Premier League title. If they back it up and win it again, you know, do they go on and try and win, you know, the Champions League? That's obviously targets. They have to try now. They're in a position with the squad that they have, they should be, you know, the goal is to begin the season, win every single tournament they're involved in. And they're capable of doing it. But, I mean, that would be one incredible achievement. But if you look at that, it'd be a brave person to bet against Manchester City doing that.
They are, of course, top of the table, clear of Liverpool in second place, Tottenham, Chelsea, Arsenal. And then are we looking at any other teams to finish inside the top four?
I think, obviously...
I mean, there is that 8-point gap then down to Everton in sixth.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I think your top four is going to come from them five. I think, obviously, Manchester United, we know the situation that they're in at the moment. But that top five, that will figure the top four, in my opinion. I think what will have a big say in it is, you know, you look at Liverpool, Tottenham, Chelsea and Arsenal, all four of them could find themselves in the Europa League. I think that will give that added problem then itself, whereas Manchester City, we know that they are in the Champions League already, so they've got the advantage straight away. What
do you think then, if we end up in a situation where those teams are in the Europa League, what's their better hope of qualifying for the Champions League? Where should their focus be?
Well, Manchester United did it a couple of seasons ago, didn't they, where they kind of waited. They played both as best as they possibly could, so they tried to stay involved, stay attached to the top four, and then obviously progress through the Europa League as far as they could go. And then it came a point in the season where we went, right, that's actually too hard basket now. This is what we need to really focus on, the Europa League. And they made it, they won the Europa League and qualified for the Champions League. So I think it's really a case of trying to stay in touch, trying to stay involved. If you can finish in your league position, top four, go for it, absolutely. Cup competitions are hard because sometimes it's an off day. It's just one bad performance and you're out of the competition. So I think for a lot of these teams, they're going to have to balance both, and they're capable of, because they've got the squads to do that.
Liverpool have had a series of poor performances away from home in the Champions League. They've got a big game coming up against Napoli on Tuesday, which they need to win if they want to qualify for the Champions League and avoid being in the Europa League later in the season. partly because of that, partly because we're coming into the Christmas period. We've seen Jurgen Klopp make lots of changes in the last couple of games. How much of a strength is that for Liverpool, that they can make those changes and still continue to get the results?
I think it's fantastic. I think, obviously, what we saw at Burnley, obviously they made a number of changes. I think they'll do the same against Bournemouth, and what they'll probably do is say, right, players that are going to be playing next week against Napoli, that played against Burnley, I think some of them will get a rest. Players that didn't play against Burnley will probably come into the team, and then they'll be fit and they'll be ready to go against Napoli. But what we've seen with Jurgen Klopp recently as well is his identity doesn't change, but we've seen a little bit of a change in system, the way that they want to play more of a 4-2-3-1. Firmino now dropping as a 10, Salah playing as a front man, and that's when we're talking about intelligent players. You have a group of players on the pitch that can play multiple different positions, and I think it's only going to stand them in good stead. And I think an added bonus as well has been the performances of Shaqiri. I think he's been absolutely fantastic since he joined.
Yeah, having a player like Shaqiri of that calibre coming off the bench, being involved every time he comes on, I mean, he's that natural player.
He's starting place, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, you know, he's that type of player that always wants to be on the ball as well. He wants to take responsibility, and he has stepped up. He's stepped up to the challenge so far. He's been a great buy for Liverpool. But, you know, just going on to whether they play their strongest team against Bournemouth or not, I think he's got to get that balance right. Yeah. He's got to take into consideration each individual. Is he able to rest them for the weekend's game and save them for the game against Napoli? And I find sometimes players actually, it works against them when they have that weekend off and they're preparing for a game midweek. Sometimes some players need to continue to play, have those games. I think the game at home in the Champions League, those players are going to lift anyway. Yeah. That doesn't matter if they play on the Saturday or don't. I think they'll lift massively.
I think one thing I'd say as well is that what Jurgen Klopp's doing now, it's no fluke. I think since he came into the job, his first transfer window was in January. He didn't bring anybody in. I think what he did, he put all the players on a sort of a trial basis, see who could come on the journey with him. And then what he's done slowly but surely, OK, he's brought a few squad players in, but he's fixed the issues that needed fixing. You've got arguably the best centre-back in world football, arguably one of the best goalkeepers in world football. So he's done it slowly but surely to make sure that the starting 11 is really strong, but now he's got strength in depth. And like I say, it was a plan that was put in place. He's been given the time to do it, and now you're starting to see the benefits of what they did.